But today I'm so excited to bring over one of my favorite young voices and Libertas Institute analyst on privacy, on DNA, on everything, on the tracking, on our phones. I absolutely love Leslie Corbly. She's one of my favorite young voices. Well, I have a lot of young voice favorites, but today she's my favorite. She is joining us here this morning. And good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. It's so great to have you back. I just love you guys over at Young Voices. And I want to just do a quick intro about the amazingness of who you are. I was reading your article in Libertas Institute website, and you are a privacy policy analyst at Libertas Institute. Your background is in journalism, law, and policy. You graduated Phi Beta Kappa with a BA in journalism and a minor in constitutional studies at the University of Oklahoma, and obtained a JD from the University of Oklahoma College of Law. Hey, honey, when do you sleep? I asked John England the same thing when he came on. My goodness. And Libertas absolutely loved it. They posted that all over social media after our interview. But I'm just so impressed by the journey that you have sought out to do. And I just absolutely am grateful that you can come here to Common Sense America and talk about privacy policy issues. You can talk about why we're being tracked. And I want to get right to it. Let's talk about this Massachusetts thing going on. You posted this back in January. So just to let the audience know, Massachusetts violates consumer consent. And you wrote government plus technology companies equals trouble. Talk to me about that.
Sure. So, really, what happened is specifically in the case of Massachusetts is the government appeared to be downloading COVID tracking applications onto specifically Android users' phones without user knowledge or consent. It appears that they had used technology built out by Google. So not a technology expert on the actual use of various technological tools. I certainly have a background more on the legal and policy front on that side, but according to the lawsuit filed by the New Civil Liberties Alliance, that's NCLA, it's a new law firm that handles civil liberties centric cases. They did allege that it appears that significant number of users, possibly well over 1 million users of Android devices in Massachusetts and surrounding states may have been impacted.
So, okay, you're saying about 1 million, and then in the state of Massachusetts. And, you may not know this, but I just want to throw this out there. Whether we are, on our iPhones or on our Android phones, and we live in other states, Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, wherever, or North Carolina, do you think the possibility of that happening to the American people at a greater level, that could happen because of how this went down in Massachusetts? Do you think that is a possibility?
It's hard to say for sure. What I think is clear is that the technological infrastructure that would allow that is certainly built out. So there are certain infrastructure technologically that would allow for various scenarios that I think people would find disturbing. Of course, whether or not those are occurring or say could occur based on the leadership in any given state raises a different set of questions. But I think that what people need to be aware of is that certain infrastructure and certain digital structures allow for certain possibilities that people may want to be aware of as far as, okay, what do the guardrails look like? So another example of this doesn't just come up with things like COVID tracking apps,
Yeah.
but an example of this comes in the realm of what's called geofencing, where law enforcement can draw a boundary around a digital crime scene or a digital boundary around a real physical crime scene.
Right.
And then they can request from technology companies all user data within that digital boundary. Now, of course, they're not going to get on the front end just names and usernames and things like that, but it's
Right.
very difficult to fully anonymize digital data. So I think the important thing to remember and really think through is what can happen with these digital infrastructures isn't necessarily what is happening or even what's likely, let's say, in various states. What's likely to happen in Florida isn't going to be the same as New York, Massachusetts, or Montana.
Well, let me ask you this. This may seem hopefully not naive, but just something like more in layman's terms. I've noticed that when my husband and I do our road trips, whether I go to Virginia, whether I go to Pennsylvania, all of a sudden I get notifications on my phone that I didn't put on my phone, that I didn't download on my phone, saying that you could have been exposed to COVID. And I noticed that, and I live in North Carolina. So as I traveled, and I noticed it during the holidays, but also not in the holiday season. And I noticed it on my husband's phone. I had to deactivate that on my husband's phone, and so he would not continue to get that notification because we didn't choose that notification. It just automatically popped up. So is that, are you familiar with that? And is more people being exposed to the fact that this was already automatically downloaded, and then you can go in and easily delete it? Because that's what I ended up having to do, because I don't want to be tracked, and I don't want to know what is in it around me. Do you know what I mean? I mean,
No, no, I completely understand where you're coming from. I think one of the things that is important to actually know is that you're going to be being tracked in a way, regardless of those notifications. So my understanding of notifications like that and is that they're as you're traveling, your cell phone is constantly pinging
yeah,
different towers. So they're probably not actually downloading anything onto your phone. So the allegations as it relates to Massachusetts, the troubling nature of that, legally speaking, is that they were downloading something onto your device. They weren't just sending you a notification like, you get Amber Alert notifications.
right,
Or
right,
things like that. So I've certainly had received those when I'm traveling across state lines of,
right,
or possible flooding or something of that nature can come up. A COVID notification like that would probably come in the same vein. Hey, we've had high cases here. You may have been exposed. But what they were actually doing was downloading an application onto your phone, not just sending you a notification that you could determine whether you want, oh, I don't want to receive these notifications anymore, or
yeah,
whatever action you could take on the back end with that. But they were actually downloading it onto your device, which the NCLA was alleging, and I would agree, constitutes a trespass since it's
right.
taking up physical space on your phone. Right? It's saying we're gonna. Even if it's a small amount of your phone, it's still a trespass nonetheless. And then, of course, violating your expectation of privacy that you wouldn't have what what could, by some definitions, amount to spyware downloaded onto your phone without your consent.
Right. I want to read a little bit of your article to the audience so they can have a couple understandings of what you were talking about. A couple things that you cited. First, you were talking about property and privacy rights. First, secretly downloading an application onto a user's phone violates the individual's property rights by taking up storage space on the phone and gathering an unknown amount of data while on the user's device. You just cited that. Second, this government program violated the Fourth Amendment privacy rights by working with Google to automatically download an application without user consent. You then went on to say, indeed, because the software downloads on individual phones without the user's knowledge or consent, it amounts to a form of spyware under the Congressional Research Service definition of a term. In written statements, Google confirmed it worked with Massachusetts DPH to automatically distribute DPH's application to Android phones. And then you had mentioned Lee described the statement as a quote smoking gun in his lawsuit against the state of Massachusetts because it removes any ambiguity regarding whether the application is controlled by the state and whether it was intended to download on user devices without their knowledge. I know Massachusetts is in its own vein, but you can't help but wonder. And I know that you're not sure. Well, I had asked you earlier before we went live, what other states could be doing this? And I kind of, I'm sitting here as a conservative podcast host right here saying, well, Massachusetts is pretty blue. I wonder if other blue states are basically infringing on the rights of Android users and also iPhone users. I have to sit there and ask that question. I know you can't answer that, but that's just me kind of going on a little bit of a rant. But what else are they doing that we are unaware of? But from your legal background, what can people do being in the state of Massachusetts and this happening without having any legal representation? What are their rights?
Well, hopefully this lawsuit will will assist in clarifying what can and can't occur. I certainly agree with the NCLA's allegations that the extent to which they have factual grounding, and I believe they do for what they've alleged. I don't think it's legal to download software applications onto digital devices without the user's knowledge or consent. I think that's a pretty clear legal line that you can't cross. That being said, I think that these kind of cases really highlight the problems that we're running into in the digital era, where some of these digital infrastructures are being built out and have capabilities that are very powerful and have not really been are difficult to they're difficult to rein in the sense that it's
Yeah.
difficult to enforce various rules against them before something bad happens.
Right.
We're kind of that's just the landscape that we're in right now, and I think this really is not a partisan issue, as it not to imply that you were making it partisan, but I don't think that this is a
I was.
partisan.
You're good. You're good. I was making a
But
partisan. Go ahead. Go ahead.
it's not a partisan issue because um, while Massachusetts may have decided today to download a COVID tracking application, it's not really clear what happens tomorrow in relation to these technologies, right? And the way that they're used or misused. So
Yeah.
the abuse of government power is pretty profound as it relates to some of these new technologies and what can be used, particularly when they're engaging in really close relationships with private actors. So I think that that's what people really need to take away from this is that there's a lot of digital infrastructure that's being built out. Our world is increasingly hybrid between digital and physical, and it's really not clear how to address and deal with those issues. Hopefully, we'll continue to have good law firms like NCLA that will take these claims and handle them. But it's you can imagine how many people may have known this happened and weren't willing to consider legal action for various reasons. It's expensive, it's time consuming. Of course, NCLA is a public interest law firm, so that certainly helps on the expense side, but it for the plaintiffs, but it certainly doesn't take away some of the other costs that come with litigation, time that's sunk into it, concerns as to how this may affect other aspects of your life. People
Right.
don't really like filing lawsuits for that reason, particularly when there could be anything controversial at stake.
Well, no, exactly. Let me ask you this. I also posted when I was promoting having you on today, the whole DNA privacy piece. Talk to us about that. You had mentioned 23andMe and all those DNA platforms for people to connect with their ancestors and see the background of where they came from. But what's the privacy concerns that you have there?
Sure, the privacy concerns really are that it's unclear. Once again, it's unclear what the future applications, future uses of DNA could be. So one of the things that's becoming more common now is if one of your family members uploaded their DNA sample,
Mhm.
it's possible to trace an individual through not a DNA they've uploaded to a website, but perhaps DNA that a family member has uploaded
Mhm.
them. So I believe they also use that in the article I wrote. I think I had linked back to the
Mhm.
recent Idaho murders. I believe it was a quadruple
Yes.
murder out in
Yeah.
Idaho.
Yeah.
Yeah. They had there was a DNA sample at the crime scene, and I believe they had uh, searched DNA databases that were private
Mhm.
to locate their suspect.
Mhm.
So, of course, most people aren't concerned to the extent that they found the right guy when you find a murderer. I don't think that's really the concern that people are having.
Right.
But
Right.
once again, the extent to which law enforcement can access this information without a warrant, without any kind of protocols, is more or less governed by the corporate policies of the companies. Of course, consumers consent to that, but I think on the consumer side, most people aren't really thinking about what that may or may not mean. So the corporate policies, all of these companies have their privacy policies posted publicly, which will lay out how they'll handle your DNA data. But I think for consumers to be thinking through these issues, in my opinion, really involves you want to be looking at, okay, how is this possibly going to be used in the future, and what am I really am I really thinking through the possible implications of assisting in building out these databases to begin with? Because it's it's not as if DNA only has applications for murder cases, and indeed it has applications beyond just law enforcement.
Right,
You can
right,
think of the different types of genetic testing that can be run through DNA,
right,
and
exactly.
understand that it has a lot of powerful information about individuals or families and those that they love.
Well, let me ask you with you had mentioned this before we talked about the DNA aspect, but what are the top three things that you can say to my audience about protecting their privacy concerns when it comes to we're on our phones 24/7. We have kids on their phones 24/7. And I know that parents have a lot of control, well, they try to have a lot of control of their kids when they're on their phones. But just the other morning for President's Day, I took my three godsons out for breakfast, and we all had our phones. And I said, "Okay, phones in your pockets, phones in the purses. We are not going to be glued to our phones. We are here to communicate across the table and to enjoy breakfast." And we all did it. It was great. We had a blast. But my point in saying that is where can we be better about knowing what our privacy rights are and knowing how we can be preventative for our kids' sakes privacy, but then also as we are just, I know I'm on my phone 24/7 and I absolutely hate it. I absolutely hate it. But where can I have better privacy in regards to the constant tracking of things that are happening? Because as soon as I notice and I know what it is, as soon as I mention purple shirt, I have all these purple shirts popping up on my browser, on whether it's Facebook or Instagram or whatever. And so, what are some simple tools for us for privacy's sake?
So some simple things you could do would be to check the settings of each app you have, and have them set to the settings you would like. So
Mhm.
actually, for things like Google, I don't even have my tracking on for any of that. So when it makes things slightly more annoying. I mean, things like when I go to
Right.
drive somewhere I'm not familiar
Yes.
with, I have to click the
Yes.
consent that I
Yes.
consent you, but I consent only doing it this time. So I
Yes.
do that for each app I have. So it's same for Instagram. I don't consent to the just having. I don't have my microphone just on in Instagram. So every single time I go to post something, it asks, like, let's say it's a video, it asks, can I use your microphone? And I put just this time.
Right. Right.
Right. So
Right.
that's a simple thing you could do. I think more broadly speaking, you could also be more. I think people need to be more aware of um, what applications they want to use, which they don't. Why? I think there's a tendency to just post on social media to post on social media. I think that's usually a mistake. I think you should probably think through. I think people need to be thinking through those things a little more clearly on the front end before they engage, and then being aware of what you really need in your life. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of uh, honestly a lot of things that people don't really need. I re-downloaded Instagram because my I knew my employer would be posting more. We're gonna be posting more videos through that forum, and so I
Yeah.
thought, oh, okay, I'll download it for that purpose. But
Yeah.
prior to that, I didn't have it. I still don't have Facebook. I don't need it. I don't see any compelling
Mhm.
reason to engage in.
Thank you for
Um,
telling me that because I went to tag you on Facebook and I couldn't find you. I'm like, wait a second, she's not on Facebook. She's
yeah,
not
I'm not on
on
Facebook.
I.
I don't think I need it, you know? And
Right.
so I think really thinking through things on that front is really another way you can take more control of your digital life is to really think through what you do and don't need on the front end. For a lot of consumers, these things aren't needed, and they're really not necessary. And then there's also ways you can use it that are pretty benign. I know I have friends that only use Facebook on their browsers, like on their computer, so they have an account but they
Yes.
never download the app.
Yes.
So that way you can access, say, something like Facebook Marketplace, or if you have certain groups you are still in that you want to follow, that's a way to do that.
Mhm.
Or to follow along with your family members or something like that. But
Yeah.
there's really not a I don't think need for some of these things. And I think a lot of it is people, oh, this is looks interesting, let's go ahead and
Right.
get on and join the crowd and whatnot, and there's nothing wrong with that per se. I think it's just we need to be perhaps a bit more mindful as to what we do and don't want and need in our life, and that's one way to think of it. And then of course another is just basic digital awareness, and by that I mean, like you mentioned, we're on our phones so often that I think it feels like part of the physical world, which
It
makes
does.
sense, but it's not.
Yeah.
And being aware of anything that transmits digitally has certain risks that don't come with the physical, and sometimes it has certain benefits that don't come with the physical. So it is a risk reward calculation and a pros and cons list that you have to run through. But um, Of course, there's more ways to access digital information than physical.
Yeah.
So I think being aware of that is another way that people need to be more mindful of. Oh, when I'm putting something out digitally, it has risks that don't come with physical activity.
Yeah. I was sitting here thinking as you were talking about just the whole privacy policy piece of it. And um, about 5 years ago, today's the anniversary. I represented Michelle Rigby Assad. She's a former undercover CIA agent. And I remember when we first started working together, she didn't have anything in regards to any online presence whatsoever. And, you go from one extreme to the complete other. And, it took her a hot minute to get used to being back online and having some kind of presence because she was so strict on, and she had to be because of her role, and having that type of privacy policy for her own work and profession. But then I sit there and say, some of those things that she said and some of the things that you were saying, we could adopt in our day to day life just to have better protection of and privacy of what we are, being a part of. I know for myself, social media is my bread and butter for my clients, for this
Hmm.
podcast. And so I have to constantly be engaging in the social media tracking aspect. But then the other side of it is just like we talked about with the whole COVID thing and Massachusetts, and noticing that I was getting these notifications I hadn't signed up for. Not necessarily the application already downloaded, but that instance as well.
Well,
So,
I think when you mention being
mm,
aware, I think that's really, really important because some of these things we go, what are simple things you can do? You notice those simple things the more you're
mhm,
thinking through um,
right.
what it is you do and don't want in your life and why and all of that. So I think a high degree of intentionality goes a long way. And I know
Yeah,
that that's not like unfortunately, it's not like a simple fix, but we are really in a a landscape where that's going to keep evolving and changing, and it's there's not going to be an easy way to say, oh well, these are the privacy centric things you can do technology wise, because you're going to end up with a different uh, not only things evolving with each app, because each iteration, I mean, I downloaded Instagram again, I was like, oh my goodness, I don't even know how to use this app anymore, like it's been
yeah,
I don't know what's going on. What the heck are reels? I don't understand what's happening. Like, what is going on? That's what that felt like.
yeah,
So it's and that's of course the reels end is different than privacy. My point is they upload their or update their privacy policies fairly frequently. And so that's something I think to be aware of when you get a new device or when you're looking at new
right.
anything in the digital realm. But that's where I think just a high degree of intentionality and awareness when it comes to anything you're doing digitally comes into play, because these are systems that are moving very quickly and updating very quickly, and they're not going to be consistent over even 1 to 2 years.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Final question I wanted to ask you. We have not talked about this, so if you can't answer, I get it. But I wanted to just kind of get your perspective, if you will, on the whole TikTok aspect. And you see South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem talking about removing it from all the government devices, and you're seeing it more and more across state governments, and then obviously federally people are looking at it. But what are your initial thoughts on the privacy breaches of TikTok?
I mean, I wouldn't download TikTok. I wouldn't have anything to do with
Yeah,
TikTok.
yeah,
It is a Chinese owned company, and whenever you're dealing and interfacing with a Chinese owned company in that way, of course, it's going to be operating at the with the blessing of the CCP. China is not in any way, shape, or form a democratic or Republican form of government in the sense that we use
yeah,
those terms in the West. So you're dealing with, of course, a totalitarian state and a company that is running at the pleasure of a totalitarian state.
right.
I wouldn't personally ever download it. I've never even considered it. I don't use TikTok. I don't have
Yeah,
anything to do with that application.
yeah,
Of course, I also wouldn't trust it, and by that I mean you don't when you download that. I wouldn't trust that the things they say they are and are not doing with their data are accurate, with your data
right.
are accurate. So, for instance, there's I believe there's been reports that it can scrape your phone of all kinds of data. And again, some of these things we do intentionally with Facebook. So if you turn on the microphone, the application can
Yeah,
like you mentioned, it hears me talk about a blue sweater and then it advertises to
right.
me accordingly.
Exactly.
But with TikTok, I have also heard, again, I cannot verify the accuracy of a lot of what's going on in the TikTok world. I don't specifically study that app or have a high degree of awareness of like what
Sure.
softwares
Sure.
or whatnot TikTok is using. But I've certainly heard. I have friends who have had the app download on their phone, then they undownload it, it downloads again. So I don't
Yeah.
really know. I never, so like on new phones, which is interesting. On my new phones I've gotten, I've had to get a couple of new phones in the past year. Um, because they keep breaking. But
I was
TikTok
gonna
will,
ask you.
they keep breaking. I don't. Maybe it's user error. You can blame me. That's fine. But TikTok will they'll want to auto download it because it's such a popular app. You know, it's one of the most popular apps right now in existence.
Yeah.
And so when you get your new phone, they're saying, "Oh, here's this new popular app. You should download it." And I always have to click the
Yeah.
like, don't
Yeah.
download TikTok. I don't want TikTok. I don't want anything to do with that application. But yeah, I wouldn't. I would think from a privacy standpoint, if you're remotely concerned with what's happening with your digital data, other social media forms of social media are risky. I would say TikTok would be at the very top of that list. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
If you're concerned with your privacy, I wouldn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah, no, well said. The trusting factor, you use the trust factor right there. You said that word. And, as we wrap up this segment, there's a lot to be said about the trust factor when it comes to any of these social media companies and what they are seeking to take from us. And it goes back to the privacy piece that you consistently bring, and you are constantly raising the flag on with Libertas and also with Young Voices. Where can we find you, with the exception of Facebook and TikTok? And what other things do you have coming down the pike that we can kind of flag to look for?
Sure. So you can, of course, follow me on Libertas. I have a website, which is just lesliecorbly.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter at Corbly Leslie. Feel free to follow me on any of those platforms. And then it's been legislative session out here in Utah. So I've been working hard on some bills that we're running here in Utah.
Okay.
One of them is actually trying to put some guardrails around the use of geofences, which I had mentioned earlier, that digital boundary that's placed around a crime scene. And
Yeah.
then user data is requested to locate suspects of the crime. So that's one bill we've been running. And then another is actually looking at ensuring that you have protection for any electronic data that your vehicle covers. So back in 2019, Libertas was involved in passing a law in Utah that ensures that in order to access electronic data, law enforcement needs to get a warrant for that. We had allowed exemptions within that law that cover things like hot pursuit, exigent circumstances, and uh, other warrant common exemptions to warrants. So there's what's called judicially recognized warrant exceptions, and
Mhm.
generally vehicles fall under that because vehicles are have a lower expectation of privacy than homes and uh,
Right.
other property people possess. So we're wanting to close that loophole as it relates to digital data because with the rise of electronic vehicles and vehicles gathering so much more data, we want to ensure that your digital data that's gathered by your car requires a warrant.
Hmm.
So
And, and
that
that
we're looking to close that loophole.
would that be the digital data for the car? Would that be used towards if there was a car accident or hijacking or any crime, if you will?
And this is really preventative. Right now, I don't think that they're running a lot of forensic audits regularly, but
Okay.
it's cars do just have a generally lower expectation of privacy, and for some, for valid reasons. If you're doing a stop, a traffic stop and you're a police officer and you pulled someone over, you may need to search the vehicle
Right.
for a safety check to ensure there's no loaded guns in the car, things like that. Generally, let's say your car is impounded,
Mhm.
they can search your car when it's impounded, and there's no expectation of privacy. What we're saying is, as it relates to digital data that your car is gathering, we don't think that poses the same risks, and to the extent that that practice could change, we think we should just close that loophole now. But there's no current I don't think that law enforcement is currently
Mhm.
running forensic audits of cars on any routine basis. This is
Oh,
just designed, given the digital world we're living in, to
yeah.
close a pretty reasonable loophole.
Oh, wow. Well, Leslie Corbly, privacy policy analyst for Libertas, and to all your social media Libertas people, I got the name right this time around.
You
And
did.
I practice and practice and practice. And then you are amazing commentator for Young Voices. And so thank you so much for being here with us. We love when you educate us on all of these phenomenal policy and privacy expert aspect. So thank you. Many blessings to you this Wednesday. Have a fantastic day, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks, you too. Bye bye. And for all of those who are tuning in, this is Common Sense America. I'm Eden Hill. Oh, I just absolutely love bringing over young voices to our show, and also Libertas, amazing policy analysts on all levels. So hashtag common sense, hashtag privacy, hashtag education and defense. We have so many amazing commentators and analysts that come over here to Common Sense America and just give us a few minutes of their time